It's Zach Edey with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Boilers in the Stands post-game show. I'm your host, Kraig Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is Craig Bowers and Joe Jackson over at Mackey Arena. I'm at home in the studio as we're up against the NFL playoffs right now. So we appreciate everyone that's tuning in and hanging out with us while you enjoy your Saturday after a big Purdue Boilermakers win, getting back in the win column after a tough loss on the road in Nebraska. And we saw a lot of good things here today that we're going to touch on. A couple players that I think, haven't gotten a lot of run or a lot of action scoring the ball and doing some different things, getting some minutes today that I think is going to help going forward. But it was definitely good medicine here, getting back to Mackey Arena, as Kraig has pointed out, teams that whenever Purdue loses, and then they follow that up with a home game, it's normally not a great recipe for the team that has to play Purdue. So Penn State drew the short straw here today, and Purdue comes away with a pretty convincing victory all the way through. So we'll kick it around the horn. Kraig, I'll start with you. Your takeaways from the game here today.
Well, first of all, you said you were up against the NFL playoffs, and I haven't paid too much attention to the NFL. I just wondered what time the Bears play this weekend.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what time the Bears play this weekend. Joe, go ahead and give me your opening thoughts here on the game today, since Craig's got a sharp tongue, wants to try to get me upset on this beautiful Saturday afternoon.
Coming into the game, my biggest key point, emphasis, I guess, whatever you want to call it, was Edey had to have a good game. I just did not think Penn State had a single answer for him coming into the game. They did not have a single answer for him. They doubled a little bit at first. He has 3 assists that helps when Purdue knocks down a lot of their shots. They were shooting. They were 8 of 6. They were 8 of 16 in the first half from threes. They started out 7 of 10 from 3. That takes Penn State out of the double, and then Edey just goes to work 30 and 20. Just a game that I think you saw, the first couple of minutes kind of feeling it out. It wasn't too great. Dominated the next 20 and then coasted the final 15. And against a team like Penn State, where Purdue is very, very, very much more talented and the better team, it's just the type of game that I kind of expected coming into today.
Yeah, 100%. Penn State, they've had trouble defensively in the post, and they've had trouble rebounding the ball. Robbie Hummel said that to start the broadcast, and that is also a recipe for disaster if, those are things you struggle with when you face Purdue. Now, Kraig, I'm going to give you a second opportunity here, and if you do not stick to Purdue. And if you try to make fun of my Chicago Bears, you are going to be kicked off the show for the day. So go ahead with your thoughts on the game today. And do not talk about CJ Stroud or any quarterbacks coming out or Aiden O'Connell. The focus.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I can stick to it. You know, Joe and I, we're starting to kind of put out some of our keys before the game on the Boilers in the Stands official Twitter. We'd kind of done it a little bit ahead of time, just me or him or whatever, but not officially on the Boilers in the Stands. So we came together today and kind of did that. And one of my big points coming into it that was we have to play our style. Purdue has to assert their will. They have to play their way. And that feeds into a lot of what Joe was talking about in terms of just getting Zach the ball early and often, making sure that the offense was running through that. But when you play a team that presses like they do and that wants to trap as you get close to half court, it's against a lower talented team, like Joe said, you want to make sure that you don't fall into their style of play. They want to muck everything up. And Purdue did it a couple of times, let things get away from them, got a little bit sped up. But by and large today, Purdue stuck to who they were. And you saw Purdue's identity all over this game. And then when you add that in with everybody contributing, right? 9 guys scored 5 points or more today. So shots were falling all the way around. Everybody was contributing. Ethan Morton was the only one not to get in the scoring column today. That's a really good recipe for success all the way around. Limiting turnovers is part of that. Purdue's season average was 12 turnovers coming into this game, 12.1 turnovers. I think they end up with 14 in the end, but a couple of those were like in kind of slop time after some of the walk-ons got on and whatnot. So, you know, they didn't let Penn State throw them out of their rhythm, throw them out of their style. Mostly they controlled the ball well through most of the game, and I think that was obviously one of the biggest keys of the game.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and the thing that, and I'm excited to get into it, but when we talk about, you know, Miles Colvin getting action, you know, Caleb First, who's only had like 3 points in his last 3 games, you know, getting some work, you know. Yeah, Robbie said that on the telecast, and it surprised me as well.
No, I was looking at a comment. I'll get to that comment later.
Okay, we'll get to the comment here. Star that comment because I wasn't sure if that was for me.
I just did.
I didn't know if Robbie gave some false information, but regardless, like I said, you know, in a blowout like this, which somebody in the comments earlier said it's a boring game. Well, good. You know, Purdue has too many interesting games. They play up and down to their competition at times in the last few years, and they can beat a team like Arizona or Gonzaga and all these great teams, and then play down to certain competition. You know, Nebraska, of course, comes back to earth here today, doesn't shoot 15 threes, but against Purdue, of course, they were on fire. But that's the life of Purdue. They're always going to get every team's best punch, especially when they have that number 1 next to their name. And today, Penn State didn't give them their best punch. So, you know, Purdue got to have a coast game for once. And when you're leading into a big rivalry game here coming up on Tuesday on the road, that's just what the doctor ordered. So I'm not going to complain about a boring game, but also, you know, it's encouraging to see a guy, and we can get into player breakdowns as we go. But just for me, Miles Colvin getting as much action as he has when he seemingly hasn't played here, you know, the last, you know, since Big Ten play has started. That's great. Like, he has ability, and he showed that today. And to him to get some run out there and not look rusty and look ready to play and have a little bounce to his step, I thought was very encouraging.
Sorry, I'm going to be 100% honest. I got lost in the middle because right now, Edie Jones, they're doing their signing. And as Robbie Hummel was leaving the court, he kind of got pulled into signing for all the people because there was a loud scream for him. So you were talking about Colvin or Heidi?
Yeah, no, I was talking about Colvin. Yeah, no,
Colvin was solid. 2 not good passes, to say the least. But you know, Colvin is going to be who he is. He's going to always be ready to shoot coming off the bench. I think he took a shot in this first possession that he's in. He's a guy that I have no worries that when his number is called, he will be ready, whether he plays well or not. Obviously, you see that game to game, but he's not. I don't worry about him being a guy that sits for 4 games and then has to come in and play 12 minutes and just not be ready. I think he's going to be a guy that will always just be ready to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and something that I thought was really encouraging with Colvin in this game and in the last game that he got a little bit of run. is he's starting to get into the paint a little bit more. He's starting to take people. If that three's not there, he's starting to get in. You saw him today. He did twice in a row, but the first time he gets into the middle of the paint, he pivots, he turns, he gives a drop-off pass to TKR, who immediately shoots and gets an easy layup. So you're starting to see him. When we don't see these guys get run in games, you start to wonder, well, what's their development like, right? But they're developing in practice every day that they're not playing games. And you're starting to see some of that with Colvin, even though it's in really small minutes. You're starting to see little snippets of what he's adding to his game and how much more comfortable he is taking the ball off the dribble a little bit more as well.
Yeah, so I don't know which way you guys want to take this. I mean, like I said,
Let's start
well,
with Zach Edey, please. Let's do it.
Yeah,
we never do it, and we have to, even if
that's
it's just
great.
for 5 minutes.
No, you're right. It's a great point, because to start the game, I was like, oh, here we go. When it was close, like 10-11, 11-11 or whatever it was early on, and they were trapping him and there was a couple turnovers, I was like, no, man, like Zach's had too many games this year where I feel like he hasn't been strong with the basketball, but they put that to bed very quickly after that early, start where it was pretty even, and just completely blew them out of the water. And you're 100% right. Zach Edey running the floor for a dunk. Zach Edey drawing triple teams and making the easy pass and making clean passes where guys can take a shot in rhythm. 4 different 3-point shooters to start the game, spreading it around. Mason Gillis in the corner, Camden Heide knocking one down, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer. Like, if they're gonna go deep and win Big Ten championship and do things in March, that's the kind of play today that we saw from Zach Edey that you're going to need the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think, and even the first couple possessions, I wasn't too worried. It felt very fluky, the turnovers. Like, usually you can tell when Edey's flustered, and that the first double where it's a turnover, he was like, he had a ton of time and nobody moved off ball for Purdue. Kraig pointed out to me, like, Edey was calling for TKR to cut to the rim. He didn't. There was just zero movement, and that's just not Purdue. And then from there, he starts making good passes. I know Corey early in the chat said, if you're Penn State, why wouldn't you double Edey every single time is what he said. Why don't you double Edey every single time? They did at first, and then Edey was making really good passes out of the post. Like you mentioned, Gillis hits a 3. Like, there was a bunch of guys that hits a 3. Jones hits 1. And so when Purdue is starting 7 for 10 from 3, like, you just kind of have to get out of it. And then you saw in the second half, they kind of had to go away from it. And now Edey was able to, I mean, it has to feel so good for Edey when it's like, if he finally doesn't get double teamed, especially after a Nebraska game when he's like triple teamed pretty much off ball the whole time. That just has to feel so good that he could just be like, no, everybody get out of my way once I get the ball, run through, clear out, and I'm just going to go to my post work. Just absolutely dominant on both ends of the floor too. 3 blocks to go along with it. I think Penn State did a decent job at times pulling him a little bit away from the rim, and then that's when you saw a lot of the cuts and drives to the rim, I thought, for Penn State. But this was just a reminder of what Zach Edey can do. 30 points, 20 rebounds, 6 on the offensive glass, 10 of 12 from the field, 10 of 14 from the free throw line. Like, he quite literally got what he wanted, and he had to. Because like I said, like Penn State, I like Wahab's solid, but they do not have anybody to match up with him.
Kraig,
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, no, without a doubt. And, Greg, you said something about Zach maybe not asserting his dominance as much in a couple games before this. And I don't know that I totally agree with that, because a lot of it is just how they're going to play Zach. And you don't want Zach forcing his way to 30 points, because that usually means it's going to be an inefficient 30, or he might draw some offensive fouls. You want him to take what the defense is giving him. And yeah, at some point, sometimes he's just got to go get a bucket and figure out how to go through a double or sometimes a triple team. But you don't want him necessarily doing that consistently. And I think it's just the way Purdue's been played in the last couple of games that's led to that more than anything else. And the way Penn State eventually decided to kind of guard Zach tonight led to him being able to have a really efficient game where he could get to 30. He had the 20 rebounds, so he's getting a lot of putbacks as well. Had 6 offensive rebounds, so he's getting points off that as well. And then I think he gets to the free throw line and makes 10 tonight. I'm pretty sure he had 20 points off the floor and 10 or 11 from the free throw line. So, all of that just kind of lends itself to a Zach Edey game. But, again, to me, a lot of it is just how the other team is going to decide to play Purdue. And when they play Purdue like they did tonight, then Zach's got to eat, right? He's got to go out and get 30 and 20.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. So do we want to get into team stats of the game and then branch back out into some of the different individual performances, kind of how we always do it here on the Boilers in the Stands post-game show? Please hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't already, as we're getting close to 2,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We appreciate everyone tuning in across all platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, of course, and even Twitch. We got the Twitch channel opened up for anybody that wants to tune in. So, yeah, let's get into the stats of the game. Team stats, as I said. So field goal percentage, Purdue shoots a scorching hot 58% from the field on 32 of 55 shooting. Penn State, 45% from the field, pretty good on 29 of 65 shooting. 3-point percentage, once again, Purdue, red hot, 46% from three on 11 of 24 from the 3-point arc, 32% from Penn State, 9 of 28 from the 3-point arc, 69% free throw percentage. Want to get that number up if you're Purdue, 20 of 29 from the line, 65% from the stripe for Penn State, 11 of 17 from the line. So Purdue outshoots Penn State by 12 attempts from the line. 14 turnovers for Purdue, only 9 for Penn State. They win the turnover battle. 17 points off of those turnovers for Penn State, only 8 for Purdue points off turnovers. Rebounds, Purdue absolutely dominates the glass. 43 total rebounds, 33 defensively, 10 offensive, only 24 rebounds for Penn State, but that happens when Purdue's shooting 58% from the field, but at the same time just completely dominate on the glass. 24 rebounds, 18 defensively, only 6 offensive rebounds, 14 second chance points for Purdue, 4 Penn State second chance points, bench points, 42 bench points for Penn State, 29 bench points for Purdue, 38 points in the paint to 36 for Penn State, fast break points, 21 fast break points to 12 for Penn State, 3 blocks for Purdue, none for Penn State, 9 steals for Penn State, only 3 for Purdue, 26 assists. I think it was 16 assists on 18 made field goals in the first half. They finished with 26 on the game, 19 assists for Penn State, and Purdue led for 36 minutes and 15 seconds of this game. So there are the stats, guys. Kraig, any of the stand out to you in a blowout performance for the Boilers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 stats that always need to jump out to you as a Purdue fan, that if we have a dominant advantage in those 2 stats, there's a really good chance we won the game. Rebounding being one of those. So 43 to 24, I think was what you said, was we finished up in terms of total rebounds. Just as importantly, Purdue finishes with 10 offensive rebounds to their 6 offensive rebounds. That leads to 14 second chance points for Purdue. And you can pretty much just bank on it. If Purdue's going to be close to plus 20 on the boards, there's a really good chance that Purdue came out with a win. I think, secondly, I don't want to steal anything from our guy over here, but the second thing that kind of lends into rebounding, because if you're dominating on the glass, chances are you're going to draw quite a bit of fouls when you're doing that too. Just that free throw disparity. Purdue attempts 29, they attempt 16. Purdue makes 20, they make 11. Those 2 things right there are always going to be recipes for success for Purdue.
How about you, Joe? Where you stand on the stats of the game?
Yeah, I mean, turnovers limiting to there was 14 turnovers. 2 of them I think were kind of garbage time. Edey ended with 4 turnovers. 2 of them were because he was saving a ball out of bounds on an offensive rebound. So you can take that for what it is. I think the biggest thing with that too, with the turnovers, is I can only think of 2 off the top of my head that led directly to Penn State points. The only time that Morton tried bringing the ball up against the press, he got absolutely ripped. That was for 2. And I think one of the Jones really bad passes led. So this is even the turnovers, although there was 14, I only think a couple, maybe one of the garbage times, whatever. Most of them didn't lead directly to Penn State points, which I also think is a kind of big key with that. The other one, obviously, 3-point shooting. They start 7 for 10. I've already mentioned how that took Penn State kind of out of their double team and what they wanted to do. 26 assists on 32 makes is the other one. The ball was moving around. Braden Smith with 11 assists. He was kind of just doing what he wanted on offense, especially in that second half. I think he had 6 assists in the first 5 minutes. So ball was moving well. You're not turning it over too much. You're dominating the glass and hitting threes. Like you're going to win those. Purdue's going to win those games 99 times out of 100.
And relative to those turnovers, Joe, I see quite a bit in the chat talking about some bad passes today and that sort of thing. Penn State teams that play against Penn State average 16.8 turnovers a game. That's like in the 350s, meaning Penn State turns everybody over, no matter what. I said it yesterday, and then we said it kind of again. Like they're going to force some turnovers. They're going to make teams uncomfortable. You're probably going to be higher than your season average. You just can't let that get you frantic and change the completely style that you play. It can't speed you up, any sort of thing like that. So it's not a surprise at all to me that we're slightly above average, but by and large, they handled it well.
Yeah, yep. As Shan Cox puts in the chat, I wonder if the 11 assists for Braden is a career high. Certainly up there.
Tied for his career high. He had 11 against, I believe, Morehead State earlier this year.
Yeah, so we can get into all of that here as we continue. 26 assists on 32 made shots. Yeah, it's, it just shows how they're sharing the basketball. And, today was just great medicine for Purdue after, a tough loss in Nebraska, a very frustrating loss in Nebraska. Also, some people in the chat also saying down goes Kentucky. They lose just as we launched here, went live here. So I think Kentucky was ranked 6th in the country. So how many teams in the top 6 have lost? I think every team in the top 6 has lost this week.
No, UConn hasn't.
UConn hasn't. So, and that just goes to show you what's going on around here. And it seems like Purdue is the only team, that's in the top 5, top 10 the last couple of years. When they lose a game, it's national news. It's, something of note, and everyone seems to make their jokes about, but you look at some of the losses by these other teams in the top 6, and maybe this is just because we only pay attention to the Purdue clippings, but it just does seem like the attention draws to Purdue a little more with some of these losses than the other teams. Not that I'm jaded or anything, it is what it is. Let people pay attention to you. It means you're doing something right. So, all right, well, let's kick it around. We don't have to go insane with today's show. We could even try to fit in a preview show for the Purdue IU game, but we got a quick turnaround with that being on Tuesday, so we'll just have to wait and see what our schedules look like. But a big game coming up here on Tuesday. Obviously, today doesn't have too much meat on the bone as far as the competitiveness of this game, but still some things to break down. So we can get into individual stats for Purdue. I don't know where you guys want to start. We already kind of touched on Zach. 30 points on 10 of 12 shooting, 10 of 14 from the free throw line, 20 rebounds, 30 and 20 on the day, 3 assists in only 27 minutes of play. Or wait, I'm sorry, that's the plus minus. How many minutes did Edey play today?
30. Or no, not 30. There's no minutes on there, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to look to see.
I got
maybe
you.
Hold on, maybe it's on this one. Hold on, here we go. How many 30 minutes of play for Zach, and he goes 30 and 20 on the day. That's incredible and a great response for the reigning national player of the year. I don't know if you guys have any more you want to touch on him, or if we can move it around the horn for some other players.
Let's go to Heide. I want to talk about Cam Heide because what I have seen over the past couple of games, like I am very confident in his role off the bench right now. To me, he is pretty clearly the 7th man. I think obviously Morton's going to get minutes too because of his ball handling capabilities. But Heide is the guy to me. He is the one true wing that I think gives you good stuff on both ends. He is not going to be, he's not going to be an elite offensive player, and he's probably not like the most elite defensive player, but I think he plays really good defense, and I think he knows his role in offense. Make corner threes, be able to drive the ball a little bit, finish a couple of times at the rim. He knocked down, I believe, 2 threes today, and I'm sure Kraig will mention that because I think he has that start or whatever. But he just is consistently making good plays to me, and I think it was always going to come down to him or Colvin for the rotation, who kind of gets that last wing spot. Gillis is going to always be the first big off the bench with what he provides next to Edey with the shooting and that. But Heide, just to me, he's really, really proven what he can do on both ends. And I think Painter trusts him on both ends to one, play good defense. He has good size, but can still, like, they were Purdue's fine putting him on Clary or Baldwin, who are both, 6-foot-ish guards that are pretty quick. He can play against bigger wings. Like if Purdue ever matched up with like Tennessee or whatever, again, at this point, like I would assume Heidi gets more minutes against Dalton Connect. Like he can kind of guard that as well. He can, and then he just makes good plays. And out of that wing spot, I think that's what Painter's looking for, is who's going to play in that role the best and who can he trust the most for however many minutes it is, whether it be 15, 20, 25 minutes. And Heidi's just really, really stood out to me that he's going to be the guy that can do it. And I think it's going to continue. I think it continues for the rest of the season and into the tourney. Like his size and athleticism translates to me.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that you're going to see his minutes continue to creep up as the year goes on. He gets more and more comfortable. There in the second half, Painter actually runs action for him where he catches, he kind of shows a three, the guy closes out. So then he drives, really nice drive with some athleticism, gets to the rim, just barely misses a layup. And then I think Zach got an offensive rebound off of that, if I'm remembering exactly on that play. But he's shown a little bit more to his game just all the way around. And he's so comfortable and smooth shooting the three. He's shooting 50% coming into the game, and then he goes 2 for 3 today. I've kind of got a running bit about like the requisite one Cam Heidi three, because I don't know how many games in a row he's hit exactly 1 3. But today he hits 2. I think just as he gets more and more comfortable with that, wouldn't it surprise me to see his attempts go up to maybe 4 a game if he's getting 15, 20 minutes a game at some point. Don't know if he's ever going to get to 20. But I think especially on games where Fletcher maybe isn't on it offensively, just the defensive advantage that he brings with his extra length, his extra athleticism, especially when we're playing longer teams, I think you're going to see Cam get more and more run, and he's going to be the guy that's going to win out on that.
Yeah, and you can see not only, offensively what he brings to the table and defensively on the perimeter, but rebounding. He had a big rebound at one point where, he just shows his 41-inch vertical and length and athleticism that he has. So that's going to keep him on the floor as well. So starting to see an uptick on his minutes. I don't know if there was anything that stood out to you as far as the minutes breakdown that you do here for every game, Joe.
Yeah, I think for me it is, we've seen Morden come off the bench first, and he will probably replace Jones because Painter said he wants 2 ball handlers on the floor at all times. This time he brings in Heidi first in that first half with 15 minutes left in place of Lawyer. And so it kind of just flipped the rotation. Usually Jones comes out first and then Morden comes in, and then a few minutes later Lawyer goes out for Heidi. This time it was flipped. Heidi's first off the bench, and maybe he especially early in the game, kind of a slow start. That Heidi substitution, I think, is Heidi plus Gill substitution is kind of what really got Purdue starting to go again. Also, just finally being in the flow of the game, right? I think the first 4 minutes at times can just be tough in general as you try to find your footing. But Heidi comes in early, then it's more and after that for Jones. That's, to me, really the only, I think, big rotation thing that stood out to me. Obviously, in the second half, it gets a little wonky, especially for the last, 12 minutes of the half. But Heidi only plays 13 minutes, and I think that's just more because of how the rotations kind of fell with him. But other than that, I don't have too much on the rotations themselves.
How about you, Kraig?
Yeah, one other thing, TKR's first 4 minutes, obviously at the 4 against Edie, he comes in and does fill Edie's 4-minute gap at center from the 8 to 5 minute mark in that first half.
How about you, Kraig? Anything on the rotations?
I just think that in all reality, Heidi's minutes were kind of cut into it. I thought Heidi could have ran a lot more, and I think he didn't because Painter wanted to get Colvin some minutes today. Because there's going to be certain games where Painter can try to develop Colvin. And look, when Colvin's shot is on and it's as pure and as sweet as it is, there's going to be a lot of people, kind of the Brandon Newman thing, like where there's going to be a lot of people saying we need more Colvin, we need more Colvin. Right now, he's just still really raw defensively from a team defense standpoint. I thought he did some good things today in terms of getting back and recovery after he'd gotten beat off the dribble. He's really quick and recovers fast, so you have to like that. But from just a rotational standpoint, you saw him kind of get lost a couple of times there, but in all reality, if this was a crunch time game that was a 5 to 8 point game, I wouldn't have been surprised at all if Heidi would have got more than 20 today.
Now, who's Johnny in the chat asks, who would you trust more, Heidi or Lawyer? For him, it thinks it's an easy question.
In
Yeah.
what regard? Like
This, there you go.
defensively, offensively, like, you got to give more context to that.
I think that's something I wanted to hit on because I think there's a lot of, and rightfully so, right? It's fair to have debates on who should play more and all of that. For me personally, though, I don't think I agree with anybody saying X player out of the wing specifically, right? Jones, Lawyer, Heidi, Colvin, and I forget Morton. I don't agree really with anybody saying this guy needs to play more than this guy, because with like the wing group is so diverse in their talents this year. Like everybody brings something different. If you want if you need purely offense, 3-point shooting and just aggressiveness, you're going to go to Lawyer. If you need pure defense, you're probably going to go to Morton. Mixes Heidi. Obviously, I think Jones is kind of not really in that group. He's going to play his minutes. Like, I think that there just has to be context to it all of what exactly do you need at that moment in time for the team. And that's a good thing. Purdue has options. You couldn't have always said that last year. Purdue has options this year of what they want to go to.
And to his point, Lawyer is the better ball handler right now. There's no doubt about that. But the fact that we have Jones right now, it kind of takes that need away to some point, right? We saw multiple times today where Smith kind of got trapped, was having trouble getting the ball up the court, tosses it to Jones. Jones is a really sturdy built body. He can take some contact. He can dribble through it. And he's just completely changed how we handle the press. I think out of all the turnovers today, only 2 were truly in the backcourt against the press. One was when Morton got his pocket picked. So you've got that added ball handling element that you had to have Lawyer for last year in Jones. So that allows you to play a guy like Cam who can be better defensively against certain teams when you need him to. There's still going to be plenty of games where you need that offensive punch from Lawyer. And he's going to get his run. And like Joe said, and like we've said multiple times on the show, it's not a matter of this guy over this guy. It's a matter of who's got it today and what's the specific matchup today, and quit worrying about who needs more.
Yep. No, that's fair. Before we move on to some other players to highlight, there is something that's bothering me, and it's your guys' background. So like when if you look on the screen, it says our house. So somebody needs, there it is. Now it's lined up because it said house now, because you guys aren't sitting too far apart. Now it says our house. Thank you. Nice job, guys. Nice job. All right, let's move on to some other players here. As we kick it around, and maybe here to end the show, maybe we can, briefly touch a little bit on the upcoming IU game, just in case we're not able to get a preview show in on Monday night, depending on our schedules here, as I do production meeting here on the show. Like I said, I mean, we've talked about, the wings, and we've talked about Colvin. So I'd like to kind of kick it to Caleb first, who I thought really had a nice performance, 7 points, 3 of 4 shooting, 3 rebounds, he just got in the action. And so it was nice to see him get in there. I'm not sure how many minutes. Let me move over to this graphic to figure out. 12 minutes of play. So I just thought he was very efficient in his time. And it was just nice to see him kind of get more active, in his production. Am I reading that right, Joe? So
you are. I have the stats pulled up on mine also, and like the just Purdue page also shows minutes, and I have no idea, but this one that I screenshotted doesn't, and I don't know what changed because I literally haven't gone off this page.
That's okay. We'll make it work. We're improvising here, but did you guys feel a little more? Because I'm always so hyper focused on that 4, the 4 spot here, and Mason Gillis is starting to emerge, knocking down some dagger threes here lately that I think, when you're able to do that, that really is going to elevate you. And just to see Caleb first get a little more active and do some more things. We all know that he's going to be scrappy on the defensive end and work his way on the offensive glass, but I just need as much offensive output as I can from the 4 as I can get, knowing there's only 1 ball on the court. So, anything for you guys that stood out to Caleb first, like it did for me, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I thought he had good minutes. I thought he had pretty good energy. You see what 7 points, 3 or 4 shooting. I thought he had a couple strong takes. You saw him the one time pass up a 3 and he kind of drove.
Yes, that was
itself.
Yep.
the drive itself didn't end up in a layup, but then it's like he had positioning on a post up, was able to kind of back down after that.
No, you're right. He
just
didn't do
being
too
more
much.
aggressive.
He didn't do too much there. Like he had it at the top of the key, did little spin move. He kicked it back out. Then he reset on the block. And then when he got it, he was in a position where he could make a stronger move to the rim. I saw him do that at one point. I saw Miles Colvin do that at another point where he went inside the paint. He thought he was going to force it. Instead, he throws it to Trey Kaufman-Renn. Nice little bounce pass that got Trey an easy bucket. So I thought there was some good decision-making, in that regard, not trying to force it for some of those players, including Caleb First.
Well, and he was confident. I think where Caleb gets in trouble a lot of times is sometimes he questions what he wants to do. And when he gets underneath the basket, sometimes he'll start head faking. It's like, just go, buddy, just go. And I thought he was a lot more confident today about his decision-making. Thought he took his time on the one post up and just made a really nice move and was direct about it when he decided to go ahead and make his move and score.
100%. Chris R in the chat. Whose house? He goes, whose hose? Our house. Play on words with the spelling behind. For those of you that are going to tune in later on our audio podcast, Kraig and Joe's background is where it says our house. So that was the whole housekeeping I was doing earlier, just to give you guys some context for our audio listeners. But it's always fun to tune into YouTube to see our sweet smiling faces. So yes, sir.
Kraig, I know we're going to jump to the probably next player. And I know you starred something, I think, about Jones. Do you want to start with Jones? Do you want me to go?
I do want to start with Jones.
I figured you did.
Look, he had 2 bad passes today. He finishes with 3 turnovers, 2 very bad passes, 2 bad turnovers, ends up with 3 turnovers. Smith ends up with 2 turnovers. Edey ends up with 4 turnovers in this game. 3 turnovers isn't a number that's going to make you just pull your hair out in a game like this when he's handling the ball as much as he is. Outside of that, he was incredible today. He mainly guards Ace Baldwin. He forces him into a super inefficient 2 of 8 from the field as his primary role. He starts out hitting threes. He hits a 3 coming right out of the second half. He shoots 3 of 7. He didn't take a single shot at any point today that I questioned. All of them were in rhythm. All of them were within the flow. He attacked the rim a couple of times, got downhill one time on a fast break, got a steal. I think he finishes with 3 assists and 3 rebounds, if I remember right, something like that. 4 and 4. 4 rebounds, 4 assists. And everybody is really excited this year about how Purdue has looked against press defenses. And yeah, Purdue has worked on it. But Lance Jones is a big, big reason Purdue is able to handle the press as well as they are, because we have a true secondary ball handler. And he's a guy that can, like I said, he can take some of that contact that doesn't get called when you're facing a team that presses. And it's that like, oh, we're just going to keep hitting them and eventually the refs will swallow the whistle. They're not going to call everything. He can absorb that contact and just keep moving forward. A lot of that is Lance Jones. Braden Smith has gotten much better at it, but it's basically a Smith and Jones show on that end of it. I saw a few different comments about Lance not having a good game today. And yeah, those 2 passes were really bad. At the end of the day, turnovers are turnovers, regardless of how bad the turnover looked. He only ends up with 3. Not much that I didn't like about Lance's game today, other than those 2 bad passes.
No, you always got to love his aggressiveness. And he finishes the day here with, let me find him on the stat sheet, 14 points, 5 of 9 shooting from the field, 3 of 7 from 3-point land, 1 made free throw. And then he had 4 total rebounds, 4 assists, 4 fouls. So he's getting in on the action as per usual on the defensive end. But I thought one of those, the charge he took where he gets called for the blocking foul. It was funny because he was very upset about it. And I don't know, like, it's funny because it could have been called a charge for sure. But it was also like Lance was like, come on, I laid my ass on the line for this. Give me the damn call, because he had to take a pretty tough hit for it. But I don't know if he was completely set either, if we're going to go completely to the letter of the law. But it could have been called a charge either way. But, I guess in a blowout, I didn't have as much of a big deal with it. But I know he did because he's the one that had to take the lick.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this much in terms of whether that was a charge or a block. Nick Kern Jr. was laughing at the free throw line and reached over and smacked him on the butt because I'm pretty sure he thought it was a charge too. So
he did get laid out on it, so it felt like it should be. Even if he wasn't completely set, it felt like just the momentum of the offensive player was more at fault than, you know what I mean? Like the offensive player initiated that contact there. So that was a tough hit he took. So, but those are the breaks. So let's kick it back around a little more. I don't know if there's anybody else you specifically want to highlight. I mean, we touched on Braden Smith briefly with his 11 assists, but he has 6 points on the day, 2 of 5 shooting, 2 of 3 from the 3-point line, 4 rebounds, 11 assists, plus minus of 22 on the day.
I do want to actually hit on him because there was something I just remembered, making sure I wasn't muted. Penn State started in a hedge, which hedge defense is we've talked about. For anybody that's new that doesn't know, it's kind of when.
Did you bring your chalkboard?
No, I forgot.
Joe, you're ruining our lives.
Yep. Hedge. So the big defending Edie, he just steps out, and all he's trying to do as Smith comes off the screen is just push Smith back, and so they started in that, and we've noted throughout the season that that's kind of the thing that's given Smith the most issues, just because he can't always turn a corner and then create. Because once he gets downhill, he's going to find whoever's open, right? I'll save that part for the end, but he was still aggressive against it, kind of drawing it. I thought he did a better job of just drawing it out. There was one time it was he kind of drew it out where he went to the corner. Now he had 2 on him, and now he just is he's in a spot where he's able to survey the floor, right? And so if he has 2 on him, he should be able to make the right play every single time, because he's going to have the rest of the court's going to be a 4-on-3. And so I forget if he hit Edie for a dunk, or no, it was a Heidi 3. It was the first Heidi 3. He goes to the corner, Heidi kind of fills behind him, and it's a wide open 3. And he kind of did that a couple times, just being able to be aggressive, draw out the big a little bit, and make good plays off of it. And then you saw some in the second half, and part of it maybe is because Edie got dominant too, was that they went to a drop coverage, and drop coverage is where the big kind of steps a couple behind the screen when Brady comes off, and that's where Braden eats. If teams should just never run drop coverage against Braden, pretty much, unless they have like some insane offense or insane perimeter defender that they can trust getting through screens, because once Braden turns the corner and gets downhill a bit, he's just going to eat, whether it be a pull-up, whether it be hitting Edie on the roll or a shooter. And so I think just the ability that he had to kind of force them to switch schemes. Obviously, Edie going for 30 and 20 helps that a little bit, because then drop coverage is going to be focused more on taking Edie away. But I wanted to point that out. Also, kind of wanted to conclude this part with Smith is like, I assume we've kind of already had him up there, but like if Braden's not considered one of the best passers in the country already, like he needs to be there. I will take his passing ability up against basically anybody in the country. And he's had too many good games this year for him to not be up there for me.
No. Yeah. I mean, he's easily a top 20 point guard in the country. I don't think that's really a question. He's probably even higher than that. And what's nice is you're starting to see him get mentioned on the national stage. The guys that cover from a national standpoint, from a Big Ten standpoint, those guys have already been bringing his name up. But whether it's Field of 68 or CBS or whoever, you're starting to hear his name dropped as one of the best point guards in the country. And it's good to see. You know, when you're a Purdue fan, you want to hear your guys called out when you're watching those types of shows, and it's good to see him getting the recognition that they deserve. I don't really have any other individual players to really highlight. Just the fact that so many different guys got in on the action today, right? Again, You had 9 players with 5 points or more. I think it was just as much as Zach was the focal point today with 30 points and 20 rebounds. You would think in that type of game, like, okay, maybe 3 or 4 other guys, scored a decent amount of points, whatever. And you look down the list and 9 guys with 5 or more points. That's when Purdue's really clicking and really hitting on all cylinders, and we saw it today.
Yeah, it seemed like Fletcher Lawyer was in a comfortable spot. Like his role was well-defined here today, like the perfect amount of usage and the plays they drew up for him, and he was efficient. And so I think they're starting to kind of find their way with these wings, and Camden Heidi starting to get a little more uptick on minutes and trying to, diversify, these minutes for these guys. And so that's, I think, an encouraging sign going forward, because then if you put these guys in their best opportunity to succeed, it's just going to make the games look cleaner. And, but you only know that by, putting these guys in the fire, and Camden Heide hasn't really been able to get in the fire very much. That's why I like today where Miles Colvin was able to get in the action a little more, because he has talent. He has athleticism. He has an ability to score. So you have to find a way to get him minutes in these games, just so you can have, a chance for him to expand that role as the season goes forward. So, but it's hard for every freshman, especially on a team like this. So, but you got to be able to utilize that talent. So having a game like this where it isn't as tight, because I guarantee if this was a tight game, Miles Colvin probably doesn't play. So,
and that's not a knock on Colvin. Like, I think, like, it is normal for freshmen to have issues, for things to have to develop. And he could be like, next year, he could take a huge freshman to sophomore leap. I could totally see that coming. And I know there's some people are like, hey, we should develop him for March, for tourney time. And like, that's a tough balance, right? Because obviously that, in an ideal world, 100%, you want to develop Colvin, get him ready, have all 10 players ready for March. But at the same time, you do have to balance like winning now. And so like a game like today, like you said, getting him some more run, getting him just more comfortable. All the talent's there. It's not a knock on him that, hey, he isn't a superstar this second. He absolutely could be in the future. Going to take him a little bit to get there. We've already highlighted the defense and the passing, but the dude is not afraid to shoot. And every single time when he comes in, I swear he just shoots first possession, and more often than not, it's a good shot too.
Yeah, 100%. So, as we skim through here, this post-game show getting close to an hour, I think we should probably try to cap this show at an hour so everybody can go back to enjoying the rest of their Saturday and their football. Yeah, of course. I got football out right here. I'm not going to show it because then I'll get some kind of copyright.
There's football today?
Yeah, there's football today. The Bears aren't playing, all right? Yeah.
Personally, this isn't even a joke. Personally, I'm actually really hyped for Iowa, Indiana tonight on the women's side. IU at Iowa should be a very, very fun game.
Yeah, right. and Iowa was at Mackey here recently. That was a drop ball.
I witnessed a Kalen Clark triple-double in person. It was magical.
There's a drop ball by me because I've been wanting to watch her play in person and I haven't yet, and that's my bad.
But she could go to the Fever #1, which I would be excited for too. Indiana Fever.
Do we want to do 10 minutes on Purdue IU and then?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We'll wrap up the show here previewing Purdue IU. No, you're fine. And just kind of what to watch for here coming up on Tuesday. We may or may not do something on Monday night, but I doubt it just because of my schedule. If these guys wanted to do something, they're more than welcome, but I probably have to work. So let's do our little short, brief IU Purdue preview here coming up. I don't know which one of you wants to start. Kraig, I'll start with you.
I just think it's going to be an interesting game. I mean, anytime you go to Assembly Hall, it's difficult, right? It's never easy in what is probably the second best venue in all of the Big Ten to go down there and try to get a win. And I think IU for everybody presents some interesting matchups just because they're so long. They're so big, 3-3-4 when you look at Mbako. You look at Renew and you look at Khalil Ware and what they can potentially do from a matchup standpoint. So it's going to be really interesting to me. Their guard play is not the greatest, but they can have games. And here in the last 5 or 6 games, I'd say out of about half of those, they've actually shot relatively well from 3, which was a big issue coming into this season. So depending on how well they're shooting from 3, that may change some things in the game. But one of the more interesting matchups to me is going to be Renew on R4, whoever's going to guard him. I think he's IU's best offensive weapon. And to me, I don't really think that's even close. And then when you look at Mbako, who's going to guard him from Purdue? And I think there's a good chance Joe can maybe give his thoughts on this too. But I think this is another chance where you have the opportunity for this to be a game that Cam gets more minutes of run in as well.
Yeah,
So-
I'm with you there. Oh, what were you gonna say, Beggs?
Nothing. I was just gonna throw it to you.
No, I think Heidi definitely could, just because McBaco's, what is he, 6'9" or something like that. I'm pulling it up exactly.
I think he's
6'8",
6.
can shoot, can drive. Indiana, like the whole thing with their 3-pointers at this point is they just don't shoot a ton. They have shot over 40% 5 of their last 6 games from 3. Their league average, their percentage is slightly above national average. From 3, they just take some of the fewest in the game, or in the country. Sorry, geez. Malik Renew is going to be, like you said, Kraig, I think he's going to be the most interesting, just both Renew and Ware, because my guess would be Edey takes Ware. And so now you have a battle of 2 7-footers, both really good rebounders. Edey's going to have to win that matchup. And then you have Renew, who is willing to space, but also able to post up. Like, Renew is, I'm curious to see if Purdue just lives with it. He's taking about 2 a game. He's making just under 1 a game for 3. So, like, is Purdue just going to let him shoot? And if he starts making a couple, then adjust. This could also be where, like, the TKR Edey combo can work more too, because I trust TKR more in the post, I think, than maybe Gillis at the moment, but also what Gillis does offensively is a balance. Indiana also has to, or Purdue has to win on the guard play, right? So I don't know what they're going to do. Last game, Xavier Johnson was benched. He did not start. And Gabe Cupp started, and that was following because Xavier Johnson got ejected against Rutgers for hitting somebody below the belts. He also just didn't, like, it just seems like Xavier Johnson's not happy right at this moment, and that's just pure speculation. I have no idea. If he isn't playing well, that already limits IU's weakness is their guard depth, right? Gabe Cubs has been okay as a freshman. He's kind of, I think, what you've expected as a freshman, adjusting still, but they've had to rely on him a ton. Trey Galloway is just going to kind of do his thing. He's going to get some floaters. He's going to shoot a couple threes. We'll see if he makes them or not. But then also is a really, really good facilitator. But I think Purdue is more talented there right now. And they have CJ going off the bench, and that's really it. And so Purdue, I think, like, Brain Smith has to play pretty well. If Lawyer's in the game, he has to be knocking down shots, because that's the other thing is Indiana is a team that is very willing to give up 3-pointers. They're also pretty susceptible to teams that move the ball well. Purdue has to knock down some shots, and you look at what they did against Nebraska, although they ended up at 39%, and I mentioned that, it would have been nice to see them hit a couple early on. If that doesn't happen against IU, now the whole crowd's going to be into it, and things can just snowball from there. Edey, from what I remember last year, was pretty good in both matchups, so that's a good sign. It's against Ware this time, who's a 7-footer. But I'm excited. I think that this is a game that if Purdue can hit some threes, they should be able to kind of at least hold a little bit of a lead going late into the game. But the 3-point shooting and Edey dominating down low are probably 2 of the keys for me for it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, and Northwestern has started to fall into this category, and IU's been there here for the last few years since Mike Woodson has showed up, and he's done a really good job. I think Mike Woodson, from an X's and O's standpoint, and I think both of you guys can acknowledge, he's really put Painter in some tough spots and challenged him. And honestly, I feel like since he's been there, I think Mike Woodson has outcoached Painter in these head-to-head matchups. I don't think that's unfair to say. I think, as Kraig has pointed out time and again, the NBA style type coaches who are going to isolate and pick on your weakest defender over and over and over until you can prove you can stop it is a concern. IU never is explosive 3-point shooting. So if they're hitting their 3-point shots, they become a problem. But if they're not, Purdue could run away with it. CJ Gunn, as Shan Cox put in the chat a minute ago, has been playing really well here as of late. But again, what I was going to start with was talking about Northwestern and some of these other teams in the Big Ten and talking about always taking the other team's best punch. If IU played every team like they play Purdue, they would be a Final Four team every year. I mean, at least the last few years. I mean, IU, when they play Purdue, seems to just play with their hair on fire and plays a level of basketball that we don't see most nights when we're watching them when they're playing other teams. And they seem to get up for their rival. And there was this run where Purdue had beaten them almost like 10 times in a row, where it seemed like IU was completely demoralized in this rivalry. Mike Woodson shows up. They get some decent recruits that put Purdue in some, tough positions. Jalen Hood-Schifino being a tough matchup last year for Purdue. And Mike Woodson seems to know how to take advantage of what Painter's trying to do on both ends. So I'm nervous about that. I'm nervous about how IU is going to bring the energy I know they're going to bring, and can Purdue match it? Can Purdue not look overwhelmed like they did look in the second half and overtime of Northwestern, like they looked for the majority of the game against Nebraska? I need them to come out and really punch them in the mouth to start, to keep that momentum and energy down in that stadium and just keep it to a normal basketball game instead of the frenzy that it always seems to become. And the other thing I'll say, because I always try to keep it a buck, and this is a Purdue show, and I'm always going to gas up our Boilers, but when people talk about the best atmospheres in college basketball, no question Mackey Arena is one of the best college basketball atmospheres in the country, and consistently show it. They do it with, non-conference opponents like New Orleans, and they show up for every single game. But if we're talking strictly for a singular game, I've been to games at Assembly Hall when they play Purdue, and you would be hard pressed to find a more raucous environment than walking into Assembly Hall when they're playing Purdue. Now, they may not show up like that for every game, and that's why Purdue gets the edge as far as consistent atmosphere. But for one day, Assembly Hall, literally every time I go there for Purdue IU, it is an unbelievable atmosphere. So I got to give them their credit in that regard. They could, my whole thing with them is, if their fans and their team got up for every other team, then they would have a little more say. But it just for strictly this rivalry, they do show up for it. There's no question about it.
Now, one thing with that is, out of everybody that's in, if we're going to say there's 8 rotation players for Purdue, or 9 rotation players for Purdue right now, only 2 of them have not been in this environment, right? And that would be
Miles and Cam.
Or I was gonna say Cam and Jones, but
Sorry, Lance.
And even Camden, he was at least there at the game last year as a red shirt, and so there is more experience, right? Like last year was a lot of their first, maybe not first time, but Smith and Lawyer especially, that was their first time in an environment like that. Edie kind of knows, everybody knows what to expect. You have more, seniors with Gillis and Morton and Edie who have been through this multiple times now, and I think they are more ready for it. In terms of the hunting matchups, Hood-Schifino was a guy last year that absolutely could just pick apart whoever he wanted. I still remember, I had good seats. Shout out the Paint Crew last year, and I literally heard. It was in the second half. I literally heard Hood-Schifino. He saw Morton check in. He told Renew as Renew was inbound, he's like, hey, I'm just going to snake the screen and then pull up. He did it, drilled a 17-footer. I don't think IU really has that guy at this moment. Trey Galloway can maybe get to it in kind of his floater bag. And Xavier Johnson has it in him. It's whether we see it. There was one other thing in your ramble that I wanted to hit on, and I forget it.
Rayfell just popped into the chat, Rayfell Davis, and says rivalry week here. Just want to give a shout out to Rayfell. He's doing awesome work over on the Big Ten Network. Love our guy Rafe. He's been on the show multiple times.
The best dressed guy on the Big Ten Network. Let's call it straight. The best dressed guy on the Big Ten Network.
Yeah, but in terms of the IU matchup, Joe, to me, they don't have Jordan Hood-Schifino. But I'm already having nightmares about Trey Galloway's floater. And it's different shooting that floater over Zach Edey and drop coverage. But when he's got that little floater going from 5 or 6, 7, 8 feet, whatever it is that he shoots it from, that's something to me that'll be interesting just off that pick and roll and whether he can get that floater consistently. I think there's a really good chance in this game that Zach can get people into foul trouble. IU doesn't have a deep bench. Khalil Ware is tall, but Khalil Ware is not big. And I'll be interested to see how they try to defend Zach. But I think there's a good chance Zach can get some of their bigs in foul trouble early and force them to want to do some things defensively that they had hoped not to have to do. On the offensive end, I think personally that Woodson's really going to try to highlight that Renew matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to maybe Khalil Ware can shoot threes. His percentage is pretty high. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they try to pull Zach out and then try to let Renew cook a little bit if we're going to look for that one matchup that I think Woodson might try to look at.
And then does Purdue just live like this painter just be like, all right, Chloe, where if you hit 2 or 3 threes, we'll readjust then. But until then, just step out there and shoot him. I mean, he's shooting 1.5 a game, a little over 1 a game, shooting 42%. Like he's making them, but not taking a ton. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I remember it now, and kind of your spiel, Braggs, was about the IU rising up to play Purdue. Obviously, this is a rivalry game for both teams. Both teams are just going to naturally be more amped for this. I think there is more for IU, and not even because it's Purdue per se, but it's like this is a pivotal moment, I think, in their season. You have a pretty embarrassing loss to Rutgers, which was just a not fun game to watch. You come to Minnesota, you have Minnesota at home, you play pretty well, but you can just fans were booing a little bit like after some missed free throws, and there just is some tension there, I think. And Xavier Johnson is kind of part of that as well with what his role is going to be. Indiana goes home against Purdue, at Wisconsin, at Illinois. Indiana really has no marquee win. Their best win is home against Ohio State right now. At Wisconsin, at Illinois is going to be tough to following Purdue. If they want any chance at making the tourney, like you got to pick off at minimum one of those 3, I assume. Maybe their best chance is just because it's going to be at home where they've played better against Purdue. And so I think there is that part too, where it's just like, it feels to me for Indiana like a pretty pivotal game on the outlook of their season as well.
100%. It's going to be exciting. I mean, we need Purdue to, kind of take it to them because they beat us. How many times in a row have they beat us now? Is it 3? I mean,
2,
3 they beat us twice last year, but I think they beat us the last game of.
Nope, Purdue. The last game was Purdue IU of the season was at Purdue, and Purdue won by 2 the year before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. To end the year.
Split that year. Yeah.
They
split that
all
year.
right.
They've won 3 of the last 4.
Yep, 3 of the last 4 for Purdue. So it's definitely going to be exciting. We'll see what happens. We'll see, if we're able to get a show in on Monday, but definitely going to be here on Tuesday for the big game. Be ready for a post-game show. That'll be a lot of fun. So make sure you guys all tune in. Please hit that like button here on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Go enjoy your Saturday, your NFL next 3 days, 2 games every day for the next 3 days in the NFL playoffs. I know Craig's going to be locked in with the rest of the country. So thanks again. Purdue wins big. Thanks to Joe and Craig for all their hard work at Mackey Arena, killing it as always. Thanks to you in the chat for hanging out with us here on your Saturday, and we will see you for Rivalry Week. And always, Boiler up.